Okay, welcome ladies and gentlemen to the City of Farmers Branch Study Session meeting. It is Tuesday, June 21st, 2002. The time is 3:30 p.m. We will begin with A1, discuss regular agenda items. Councilmember Roman.
So, let's see. I had a question on something that's on consent agenda, G3, regarding the large water meter replacement project. So I understand that there's 8 different locations where we're planning to do these replacements, and there were 4 that were selected, and I was curious to understand how those 4 were selected.
Mr. Bentley?
Basically, the only reason they were selected that way is we only had $200,000, and those 4 added up to the $200,000.
I see.
And so, and they were probably the worst case scenarios. We usually try to get the worst ones first, but we also look at our budget.
Yeah.
So $200,000 is what got those 4.
Got it. And so are the other ones in decent condition to be able to continue, or do you think?
Well, they'll last another year until next year. I
Okay.
mean, we do $200,000 a year, every year. We've been doing that for the last 10 years. So
Okay.
we just keep, until we get them all done.
All righty. And then I also had a question about G4, awarding a bid and authorizing the unit price contract to Oshawa Construction for the water main replacement. So I was curious to understand if this was passed, when the project would begin and when it would approximately end.
It begins as soon as we can get the contracts, as soon as it's awarded, and we get the contracts through and get them signed. We usually release the contractor to go to work, and there's 180 days on that work, on that
Okay.
contract.
And it looks like there's also, we're paying for a traffic control plan. So that kind of led me to kind of consider what are some of the inconveniences that residents may look to expect during the work being done.
There'll be typical lane closures as they're working out into the main, main intersections of roadways. And,
Okay.
we have to control the traffic in order for the contractor to work safely. So, very minimal. It's only during the day, 9 to 3, and we don't have a lot of traffic during that time.
Okay. Are there any other things that you've noticed that we should maybe be aware of in case a resident asks, and we can say, hey, these are some of the things that you should expect to notice in your neighborhood?
They will be notified prior to, the contractor will put a notice on their door, so they'll be well aware of what's going on.
Got
in the
it.
process of the project.
And then I had a question about G6. I think we talked about it before, but I was just hoping to get a little bit of a reminder on the seat that we were giving up and what that was about.
So in conversations with Plano, given a lot of the things that were happening on that side of the Silver Line project and in their kind of corridor, they felt they wanted 2 representatives directly from the city of Plano. After conversation about what we were looking for, seats at the table during quarterly meetings and other things that we necessarily weren't a part of in the past, were kind of agreed to make sure that we were still invited to those and able to meet with Nadine and the CEO more often and the board chair, as well as the representatives from DART that will sit in those 2 seats. So we'll be involved in those conversations a little bit more as we go forward to make sure our voice is heard from that position rather than carrying that seat forward.
Got it. Okay. So I also had a question about I3, the green grabber purchase. It looks like we have 2 green grabbers and 1 on reserve, is that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct. On the operation, yeah.
Yes. And So, when will the old green grabber be replaced and the new one be placed in service? Is it pretty immediately, or is,
When we get the new vehicle in service, that's when we take the old one out of service.
and what
And
happens
then,
to?
so the one that we're replacing, that one will become the new reserve.
Okay, and then what happens to the old one? What do we end up
We-
doing? with
We
it?
auction it.
Got it. And what's the current expected life of those green grabbers?
So we look at those based on life cycle cost.
Uh-huh.
They average, right now as a primary, or what you call frontline position, 7 to 8 years, and then it goes into reserve status.
Okay, and how long have we had the one that we're currently replacing?
It'll be actually 8 years old.
Okay. And it looks like correct me if I'm wrong, but I think is this the item that's gonna be costing us a little bit more because of inflation?
That's correct.
Okay, you said it's about 20%, is that right?
So I did do some error in the actual memo.
Okay.
So it should be roughly 18.16%.
It's named after your own heart.
You're smiling.
And who knows what the market will do, but based off of the current condition of the vehicle, you're recommending that we go ahead and replace it now instead of waiting another year?
So-
Is that an option at all?
So that's correct. So this is actually already budgeted for. We're just actually getting the approval now to purchase it because the availability wasn't there before. So
But we exceeded the budget as well, right?
on that line item, that's correct.
So I just kind of was thinking, to not go over budget, I didn't know if it made sense to wait and until a later time, or if that was even a thing.
Well, not with that particular machine, but there are some savings from the wheel loader that we purchased earlier, that was approved earlier this year. So there was a little over, I think, $50,000 of savings on that side. So the money is there to purchase it now.
Okay. And then I also had some questions about the other green grabbers. When can we expect the other ones to be up for replacement?
So one is currently being built. It was ordered last year.
Mhm.
So hopefully that will be coming within the next few months. And I think the third one will be on the budget item for next year,
Okay,
or the current proposed budget, I should say.
got it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And then I also had some questions about I-4 and I guess kind of I-5 as well regarding the renovations to the rec center.
Do you want to address those now, or do you want to
Oh.
address those downstairs?
You can address them downstairs. I'm still getting familiar with, so do you guide me through? With that, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Regarding I-3, does anyone else have any comments or questions about that item right now?
I do, Mayor. I know we're going to get an update on the green grabber situation now as a result of the storms a few weeks ago. I've gotten a lot of inquiries about the trucks and pickup because throughout my district, there's still some pretty huge piles over there. So if somebody could just be prepared to speak to that today so citizens can kind of hear, what our process is and, we've got excess trucks. When was the last time we looked at our current format to see if there's something different that we can do that may be more efficient, cheaper, faster, better, that kind of thing? That's all.
I guess it relates to, I was going to suggest for I-3 that potentially moving it to consent. Unless anyone feels we need to have much more discussion about it downstairs.
I'm good with that.
No concerns here.
Okay. Giving you a tough one on your first day? All right, so we'll move I-3 to the consent agenda and call that out when it's time. All right, Councilmember Williams.
I had regarding the traffic, the
amending the code for Chapter 82, Traffic and Vehicles. I just wanted, I did get some feedback from a Karen Singh. She's the GM for the Holiday Inn Express. And she had some concerns with how our current maps are going to be laid out because it does directly impact her businesses. Because they don't have large vehicle parking available on site for the, I think it's the Holiday Inn Express and Candlewood Suites that's directly next door. So has anyone spoken to her about this concern, Mark?
I don't think it was her, but I did talk to somebody with, I believe, the Candlewood, and they have an empty lot behind the facility there, and they're gonna look at paving that and use that as parking,
Perfect.
because they wanted to turn Hotel Road into a private drive and then everything else. I said, well, that's probably gonna be problematic, because you're gonna have to build parking, then you're gonna have somebody else. So I said, really, you've got a vacant lot there, I'd try to use that and just pave that and park the trucks there.
Perfect, because I've heard from both sides, I've heard from residents over in that area that are seeing that they have a problem with trucks being parked, and so it's,
Yeah.
that, I know that that's been kind of an ongoing conflict between the two of them. And so, but at the same time, you know, they're very excited about the STARS, project that's underway, and that they don't want to lose out on the potential of that business, because they have nowhere for the buses and large vehicles to park. So, I'm glad that they have a solution. So when I reach out to her, then I'll definitely translate the same thing to her. So, thank you. And that's all I have.
Councilmember Jackson.
Two quick consent agenda items, Mayor. G2, just a follow-up to mine and John's conversation last week. I made a suggestion that we partner with the Carrollton Farmers Branch ISD in a renaming ceremony of some sorts, involve the family, the Montgomery family that's still in the area. I don't know who or where they are, but just want to follow through on that. And then item G5, question. So, and maybe this is for Chief Siegel. When we have construction projects going on in town, and we've got obviously trucks and you get to and from their sites, what kind of notice, do we work with them up front to let them know, hey, you can't go down these streets, or this is your suggested path?
Well, they're supposed to get that permit from the building side, and that's what's the placard that they're supposed to have. So that's part and parcel of that. Hey, here are the prohibited areas. However, you can drive directly to the site. Now, currently, the way the city is, there are specific, like March, for instance, you still can't drive a truck on there, even if you have a site. You're supposed to take an alternate route. So to answer your question specific, if that's not handled on the permit side, we at the police department do not handle that unless somebody calls and asks us that specific question.
Okay. So,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Anyone, but
No.
I can answer that because I did it today.
Uh-huh.
We have construction work going on and truckers that have been stopped, and I give a letter from Public Works saying they're authorized to drive anywhere that our projects are going on to deliver materials and everything else, and that's
Okay.
generally what we do.
was that a site over on the east side of District 4?
It is, let me get my district, I think this one was actually in 3, but.
Okay. Okay. So I've received some complaints, and one of them is mine. There's increased truck traffic. In fact, I followed a cement truck out of my neighborhood today. So obviously, I think it's probably part of the Presidium project or maybe Blue Lake. But there's increased hauler and cement truck traffic down Ridge Oak Way and Rosser and in those streets. And so if we could,
Yeah, those would not be Public Works.
okay.
Ours is gonna be utility.
But absolutely, that'll fall on us for enforcement if they're not
Okay.
following the proper procedures, so.
Okay, excellent. On I-4, just a quick clarification. We had budgeted originally $1 million for Phase 2 Rec Center updates. Previous council approved an additional $500,000 that included about $60,000 in cushion. What is the, what's the original $1 million? Where is that? Where's that being spent? Because I couldn't find the breakdown of those expenses?
I'm sorry, actually, there's these two contracts tonight, which covers a portion of this. The other contracts I haven't really released, I've got quotes on them, waiting to see what the outcome of this meeting was, and once, depending where this goes, and I was gonna release them. Where it's at is, we've got a painting for the entire thing, the ceiling on the inside, is part of it, wall covering in the track area, complete demo, and this, construction of the interior, for some remodel work, mill work, in the conference room, and the dance studio. One of which is mirrors. We've got ceiling grid and lights in the offices, separate out like roller blinds in the track area. So it's, we kind of, when I did this, we don't have construction manager or an architect. We did hire an architect with just a limited scope to come up with finishes, because we wanted the downstairs to be the same finishes that come upstairs.
Mhm.
So what we did is I'm kind of being that construction manager and leaving it out in trades or areas that make sense to group together. So by doing this, instead of going out to a regular public bid, which you have to be careful of, and sometimes you get what you pay for, and you have to make sure it's the best thing, so we are actually dealing with lower overhead companies, and we're trying to bring in people for the quotes that is a trusted contractor that does good work.
Okay. So the way I read this was, it kind of impressed upon me that what we're looking to approve tonight was something that was not contemplated, but you're saying that it was in the original plan, it's just that the costs have just run up and overrun and.
Yeah, and even when we did the first floor, it was like 2.1 when we went out to public bid in this case. And the Quorum, our architect, is this one is managed by Quorum, and we hired a construction manager to do this. And when we went out to public bid, they had projected just, rough estimates of where it would be, and we still came in like 300 plus over what they projected. And we had bids, just so you know, like on the first floor, it ranged from like 1.4 million for part of this, there was two parts of this, all the way up to $2 million.
Okay.
And we had to do, it was the best value, trying to find the best value overall. So.
Okay. And so Maria very kindly showed me around phase 2 yesterday, and we're getting some kind of a credit for the existing machinery that's up there because we're purchasing new machinery, correct? So is that credit factored in overall to this cost, or is that something we're going to get?
The equipment wasn't part of this project, this was the renovation project, this was, the equipment was budgeted.
Yeah, the equipment's already been purchased,
Okay.
so it's just been holding.
So the purchase price of the new equipment was reduced for credit
Correct.
on the old equipment? Okay, perfect. That's what I need to know. Thank you. If I could go back to the green grabber, which one was that? One quick question. On the green grabber, we're going to auction off the old truck, right? How much do we expect we're going to get? Do we generally have any idea? And will that go toward the $41,000 extra that we're spending now because of the cost increase?
I don't have an estimate as to what that might look like.
Okay.
The used market has typically right now been higher, so it's been really out of control.
Right. Okay. So, but whatever we get on this old truck and we auction it off, where does that money go? Does it go back into green grabber budget? Does it go to general funds?
It goes back into the fixed asset fund,
The what?
fixed asset.
Oh, fixed asset fund.
So when we
Okay.
do auctions, it rolls back into it.
Okay.
So like on grabbers, because there is a market for older grabbers for this company during disasters.
Mhm.
This is off the top of my head, I think we've been getting between $5,000 and $7,000, but this is like the market's crazy, so
Okay.
we get more, it depends. By state law, we have to auction our stuff, so
Right.
makes it a little more challenging to get the most out of it. So we try and get the most we can.
Are you also an auctioneer?
I wish, no. No, actually,
Okay. Thank you very much.
thanks.
That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Merritt.
Thank you, Mayor. My only comment is on item G5, which is the ordinance for 3377, amending the traffic and vehicles. Deputy Chief Siegel was kind enough to respond to my inquiry This does not cover parked trailers without a rig attached to it.
It does not.
It does not. And that's bothersome to me. I think we need to address that. I don't know if we can address it in this, and I don't necessarily want to hold this particular matter up, but I would like to propose that we address that trend. There are other places in District 4, for example, Gillis and some other areas where they're parking these unattended. I understand parking with a rig, I get that, but on-street storage to me is a problem. So I'd like to at least vet that in this discussion.
Isn't that covered already, Chief? Isn't
Yeah,
that,
let me-
that's already in?
Well, just for clarification, what is he saying? If it's outside the prohibited area or residential area, it's not covered. So he's correct, it would not cover that type of area. Gillis, Garden Brook, Towerwood, Enterprise, wouldn't cover that. The 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. would, because that's all encompassing. But the particular prohibited area doesn't cover those areas. Those are typically commercial areas. There's not a residential area there, so that's why they were left out of the prohibited area.
I thought they still had that, though, that they could not leave it for more than 24 hours.
48
That's
hours, that's
48
correct.
hours.
And-
Okay.
and Yes, so that is correct, that would still be applicable, but to this
But they
particular
can kind of work
ordinance-
around that because they just
Move them.
move it.
Correct,
That's-
correct.
Yes.
Wasn't that one of the complaints?
It was one of the complaints that I had from a business on Trend.
They were just moving the trailer,
Correct.
complying.
That along on Garden Brook as well.
Garden Brook is my
Yes.
special pet peeve.
Correct.
Can we try and bring that adjustment back in July?
Absolutely, and one of the things, just food for thought, that I brought up, it can be specifically addressed by signage, you know, if the council so deems necessary. It doesn't have to be part of this particular ordinance, you know, this ordinance is a city-wide focus. We have these pockets like that, that could be just signs, hey, no parking on this street, or however we want to
Yeah.
word it, however the council would, we could give that proposition.
I want to be conscientious to the business operation, the operators there. I'm looking at it more from the on-site storage of an unattached trailer rig. That's what I mean, if, you know, over-the-road trucker pulls in, I understand there's parking, he's doing business, we address that
Sure.
overall through the city. But it's when they decouple themselves and drop it and then drive their rig off somewhere else. I believe it's on Gillis, there's some that look like they're damaged and, you know, parts are hanging off and that we're not a storage yard for that. And so and traffic around the businesses on Trend, for example, have trouble ingress and egress around those particular vehicles.
Absolutely,
So-
I've seen it firsthand. Yes, sir.
Those are the things that I'm interested in, but I just wanted to raise that. It's not, and again, it is in the business area, not the residential area, so.
So we could pass this ordinance tonight and bring back a later amendment to address that. Any other
Would like that.
things that we've missed that are hiding out there?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I just wanted to let everyone know that. Very good, thank you.
Councilmember Roman, how many questions on I-4 did you have? Just because Mr. Jackson got a few off, and I don't want to feel like I'm not letting you ask you yourself.
I can wait until.
Downstairs?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we'll be fine.
Perfect. Okay. All right, then we'll move to A2, receive a biannual update from the Arts and Culture Committee. That's Natalie Machalao.
There you go. Sorry. Hello, good afternoon. I'm Natalie Masaleo. I'm the vice chair for the Arts and Culture Committee. I've been on this committee for about 3 years now, I think it's been going. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what we do and what we have done and what we're planning to do. We've been pretty busy. But this is just a general, I'm not going to read it word for word to you, but we're just here to kind of help the arts and culture grow in Farmers Branch. when John Land first came to Brookhaven College, when I first met him probably 5 or 6 years ago now, I was really excited about the idea that Farmers Branch was intrigued and wanting to cultivate arts and culture in this area and really promote and support artists. So that's our main concern. We try to recommend amendments to the Public Arts and Culture program from time to time, and we'll perform other tasks that the City Council wishes us to maybe give our opinion on or consult with us. We hold meetings on the third Wednesday of every month where we have delicious dinner, thanks to Maria. Our overall board member regular attendance is 92%, and we focus on adding established resident artists and policy professionals to the committee. So we have a representative from, well, now Dallas College, a representative from Firehouse Theater, a representative from the business committee or business community, and specifically and from Carrollton Farmers Branch ISD, and then residents as well. So some of the things that we've been doing when we're in our very short existence is that we have just finished designating an arts district boundaries, which is pretty cool. We're working on creating signage for that. We've created the Three Rivers sculpture in Mustang Station with help from John and the Dallas College students. We've created a Lovelock sculpture, which is near the Grove, that was created by our facilities, which is amazing. The beautiful mural you see outside of Firehouse Theater. We've created a Farmers Branch artist directory, which we're going to be pulling from to do events and look to those very specific artists to kind of help generate some imagery within the city. We're doing cross-committee collaboration, which I think is one of the best ideas that have come up recently. So I'm working with like the library committee. I know Gail here is working with several other committees, the historical committee, because arts can be involved in everything. And I think it's really smart for us to really be thinking in those terms. We have a dedicated staff liaison, Maria, who's amazing and needs higher pay and recognition because she's so wonderful. We have a budget of $150,000, which I also think says a lot about how much the city supports the arts and culture. We have broken up into subcommittees, so we have an artist outreach, grant making and funding, funding authority and oversight, festivals and contests, and arts and public spaces. So this has really helped us stay on task and do things in a more efficient way. I think sometimes committees can turn into a lot of talking and not a lot of doing. So Maria's done a really good job of kind of breaking us up into the areas we want to focus on. Oh, and real quick, one other thing I wanted to add, because it was my little baby project, is arts and public spaces. Some of my sculpture students made some sculptures for the Farmers Branch Community Garden, and it looks really beautiful, so go check that out. So what we're hoping to accomplish within the next year or so is create art district branding. So really looking into having signage and a designation so that people know when they're in the arts district and what to start looking for public art pieces. We're doing a collaborative photo contest with the Parks and Rec, where we'll have awards for youth and amateur and professionals. We are working on our West Side Art Trail, where we are in the process of pouring concrete pads soon, hopefully, where they'll have concrete pads, lighting, and signage. And we are hoping to do a call for art where the art is on loan temporarily, so the citizens get a taste of what it would look like to have sculptures out there. And it could be a potential to purchase or just continually having contests, and I think that really helps generate a buzz within the artist community as well. Like Farmers Branch is a place to show your art, so come to here. We have some projects for the TIP2 area public art planning, so we took a drive last meeting and drove around and saw different areas that we could potentially put some sculptures. The Mayor's Art Challenge, we have several going on. We have a lot of exhibitions that are going to happen right here in City Hall. We bought Pro Panels, which are movable panels where you can install 2D work. So I think there's like 3 exhibitions planned for this fall, which I think is really great. A Veterans Day one, Carrollton Farmers Branch Art Association art contest will be there, and then also the photo project that I mentioned earlier. And then we're planning an artist interchange, which is coming from that database that I mentioned earlier. So we're going to bring the artists together and kind of get them to start talking and collaborating with one another. I think that's going to be a really big kind of jumpstart for the city. So, any questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation. Truly appreciate it. Councilmember Merritt, do you have anything?
No, other than thank you, and then Maria, I know I've passed
Yes.
a contact on to you, so just happy that we have this as an avenue for individuals to become involved in many ways, shapes, and forms as you outlined here. So I just want to thank you and the entire committee for doing all that. So thank you.
Thanks.
Councilmember Jackson, anything?
No questions, Mayor, just echoing council members, Mayor Merritt's comments. Thank you very much for your service and for what the committee does for the city.
Williams?
Natalie, I so appreciate your committee. Your committee is one of my favorites for sure. We're very excited to have y'all working towards the art district in particular. A lot of the art district falls into my district, which just conveniently happens. It just works out for me that way. And so any way that I can be of help, or you know, a lot of what y'all are doing kind of happens in the background. And so any way that I can help promote what you guys are doing, you know, please feel free to reach out to me either by my cell or through email, because I want to support you as much as possible. And I'm excited to see what happens as we move forward with the arts district for sure.
Great, thanks.
Councilmember Roman, anything to add?
I don't have any questions, but thank you for your commitment to the city, and also some of the areas also falls into my district. So if I can ever be a resource to you, please feel free to reach out.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Next is A3, receive a report on permeable driveway options for single-family homes in Farmers Branch. Mr. Davis.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Shane Davis, Director of Sustainability and Public Health. You'll see quite a bit of me today as a result of the storm. So my intent of this presentation is to have a discussion with y'all about permeable driveways, to see if there's any interest at your level before we spend too much time in terms of staff looking at this issue. You may wonder, why is sustainability talking about permeable driveways? Why should this matter to us? Well, from our perspective and our department's perspective, it's water quality. And I'll get to how this ties into water quality as I go through this. In our sustainability plan, we have a goal. One of them is listed as harmony between the built environment and the natural environment. And also permeable driveways is a topic for the 2022 strategic plan. So I'm starting to bring this forward and see where it goes from here. So overall, the point of this across the city is to reduce the amount of runoff from whether it's commercial business, your personal homes, your personal lots. Think about what it runs off of your property, goes into the street, carried by the gutters, until it gets to the stormwater inlet, carried through the storm sewer system, and then into the creeks. Recently, we've spent a lot of time trying to improve Farmers Branch Creek. And you've seen the impacts of the recent higher intensity storms we're experiencing. That's not going away. So anything we can do, in my opinion, across the city to reduce any type of runoff would benefit the creeks in some shape or form. So one of the things you have, and this is not just Farmers Branch, it's happening in my neighborhood in Dallas, you have the residential rebuild. Typically what's happening is smaller homes being torn down, you got much bigger ones. When you build a bigger home, you now increase the amount of impervious surface. You have the rooftop that's impervious, along with any driveway construction or walkways. And it's nice in terms of the taxable value, but what that creates, the more impervious surface you have, the more runoff you have. So combine that with higher intensity storms, all this kind of ties together. So for those that are still not real sure about impervious surface, so this is a pretty extreme example in Farmers Branch, but impervious has to do with the permeability of a surface. So concrete rooftops are impervious. grass, dirt, those type of areas, natural areas are much more permeable. So in this case, you see a lot of rooftops, a lot of concrete, you're gonna get a lot of runoff in this part of the city. And you'll start to see that if you kind of look at images over time from aerial surveys across the city, you're gonna start seeing bigger rooftops. So again, it's kind of the same thing. So how do you reduce runoff? Well, we kind of alluded to this, but reduce the amount of impervious surface. One way to do that is by changing how you construct your driveways. I'm not here to talk about green roofs. There are some green roofs out there across the country in Europe where you have planted material on top of the roof. That's not going to that level, but permeable driveways, I see this around in Dallas and other parts of the Metroplex where people have these. So this is a point where you could provide options to residents if you also choose to look at this. So first of all, I'm just going to talk about some general criteria. I've talked to some staff about if we were to go down this path, if y'all had any interest, what our criteria would be, what would we look at? And so first and foremost, the permeable portion can have to start behind the approach. You're not going to run the permeable part out into the street. That's not going to work with the street. It's got to be behind the approach. We still require a driveway permit, which we do currently. And my thoughts are, and this is where I want to get y'all's opinion, I would want everything to be continuous, the same type of material for the entire driveway, versus having patches that look different. And that gets down to aesthetics. So it's, again, your city, y'all can tell me what you're thinking in terms of this, but that was my thought, is just be continuous and the same. That way the driveway, if it's constructed, will look the same across its entirety. I'll show you some pictures of rock material that's used, crushed granite and other things in other parts, very nice parts of Dallas, and it works well there, but certainly it's got to be grade dependent. So if you have a steep driveway, the high intensity storm's going to pick up all that rock, carry a lot of it into the street. Now we're going to have to go through the street sweeper and clean up your driveway mess you've created. So to me, we'd have to set some limit in terms of the grade. If it's above a certain grade, you don't get to put crushed rock, if this is of interest to council. And if it's up to me, I treat folks just like TCQ treats me at the landfill. Here's our design standards. You tell me you certify that you built this in accordance with these standards. You put your name on the line, your contractor, your engineer, that this is how it was built, versus us going out and looking at that. Can I have a picture of what a permeable driveway would look like if you do it correctly? And then you'll get a sense of why I'm going down that path, why I would recommend that. So here are some just general pictures of stuff I've seen across Dallas and other areas. So I drove by this one without my camera, my phone. So I cheated, went back to Google, so that's why I see the Google image here. This is down towards Deep Ellum. So you have strips of concrete, but in between there you have crushed rock, so where rainfall, water can enter, soak into the soil. It doesn't, not all of it soak in, but it's not just all concrete. I have yet to find one. I think I passed by one in my neighborhood. Someone just built one like this, but it's concrete instead of the pavers. But the point is you have two strips of concrete or different type of material for just the tires. Everything else is grass. So you really reduce the amount of concrete in your particular lot in this case. This is Highland Park, Preston Hollow area. I forget what street I was on. Crushed rocks, what you see there, again, the grade's flat, so that stuff's not gonna run off. You see the permeable portion is behind the approach. So these are the things I talked about. The nice thing is they also have the concrete ribbon around the outside, so it kind of keeps all the crushed rock contained, so it's not spreading all over the place. This is another example, just a different color, so different color options, but again, it's behind the approach. Again, you have the concrete ribbon keeping their rock material contained. And just again, a very large home in Dallas. I'm curious, couldn't quite figure out, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time in front of the house taking pictures without drawing a whole lot of attention. If the first part was permeable or if that was just stamped concrete. My guess is probably stamped concrete for the reason I expressed before. But so these are some different options I've seen, and this is an example of permeable pavement. If you're going to build this, this is typically what your design is going to require. So you're not just laying pavers on top of your current soil. That's not going to work. I would not recommend that. You're going down about 2 feet, excavating and starting to build it back up if you're going to do this correctly. And this would be my expectation. If you're going to do it and really reduce the amount of runoff, this is what it's going to take. With our clay soils, if you don't have some way for that water to get out over time, you're going to have a little bit of a bathtub effect in there. It's just going to hold water for a while until it does soak in. But the clay soils are kind of self-annealing, and over time, any cracks are going to fuse together. It's going to take a while for the water to soak in. But this is what it looks like if you do this correctly. So it's not cheap, but it does its job well. And in the urban areas, I suspect in time, this is the way we're gonna have to go to kind of keep the runoff down. But again, this is just one small way to start tackling some of the runoff issues we're facing in urban areas. It's by no means gonna solve the problem. I'm not saying that at all, but it gives folks some options. And other than that, it's open for discussion. Is this something of interest? Things you like, things you don't like? No, we're not interested at all. I'll quit spending my time on it. I brought it to your attention. But this is where we kind of have a conversation, kind of tell me what you want to do next, what you're interested in, and what you're not.
Shane, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Start to my right on this one, Councilmember Merritt.
Yeah, Shane, thank you for the presentation. I think it's a good, obviously, as you pointed out in the earlier slides, it's part of the sustainability plan to incorporate operations with the environment. I'm interested in pursuing this. I think we need to understand some of the boundaries and requirements that you alluded to. Is this going to be, you did say it'd be costly. Is it going to be a situation to where we put time and effort into something that no one does?
Exactly.
And so that, I say that with a little bit of caution. If we understand that we are building very, nice homes across our community, this is something we're going to have to address. So I'm interested in pursuing this on the right speed, if you will.
Yeah, because if we want to go forward with this, I'm going to an engineering firm saying, I need you to, what does it cost for you to design these design standards? Here's the things we agree we're interested in as a city. Now you design them, I'll pay you for your work, and this is a city standard going forward. So there is a cost that we're going to put forward if we're going to do this.
Fair enough.
I'm not an engineer.
Fair enough.
I'm not going to go to sleep in Holiday Inn.
That's all I have.
Thanks. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Shane. I'm interested in this as well.
Okay.
I think it just makes sense, for the long term.
There's a few folks that do have an interest in this. I'm not saying it's big. but
Sure,
We've got a few
sure.
phone calls and inquiries, so.
I'm just wondering, as far as the cost and the burden on the city, is there somebody we can copy?
Yeah, so I tried to find, when I started searching, is there other cities that already had this, so we could white out the name and put in ours? Yeah, there's other places that have done it. They typically have like one option, and that's why I want to get to see what y'all are interested in before I go down that path. If you tell me, hey, we like this one, none of the rest of them, we don't want to see that in Farmers Branch. And that makes my life a lot easier. Okay, I can go find that
Right.
pretty quickly. But if it's multiple options, then that tells me, all right, I couldn't find one that had a criteria manual for folks to use that had lots of different options for permeable.
Right.
So that's why I want to get y'all's take of what you're interested in, what you're not.
So the reason why we're reviewing this is we currently don't allow these
My
kinds of
understanding, our code is,
driveways.
concrete, continuous concrete.
Right now, it's just concrete, so we'll have to update the code,
Yes, sir.
and then provide sort of the parameters of that code.
Yes, sir.
That's where our cost comes in.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that we hand this to the construction folks, and we basically are trusting them to build it the way that,
That's why I want them to sign off on it and certify that this is how it was constructed.
okay.
So if it's not, it comes back and there's something that impacts the city. All right, you said you built it this way. All indications are that's not what happened.
We're not doing red
The
tag
repair we gotta do to-
inspections, that kind of thing.
We'd have to talk to staff a little more about this. What did we want to do? We just have kind of preliminary conversations. What would be of interest? What would we want to do? If you all are interested, and we'll go back and we'll fine tune this much more, so I'll give you a little more detail. I just want to see if y'all are interested. If y'all are interested at all,
I'm interested, obviously, just want to minimize the city's cost and time and resources in it, but I think it gives, particularly our tear down rebuild.
Yes, sir.
Contractors some options in some of the larger homes as opposed to just concrete. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this coming, so I like the idea, so.
Yeah, they're doing it better and better. I mean, there's some bad examples out there where folks just put pavers on top of clay soil, and that's,
Right.
doesn't work well at all. Not gonna name any names, if you want to know offline, I'll tell you where to go look.
Right, okay, very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Williams.
Shane, I'm very interested in this as someone who lives on the creek. Then I think any I would love to see some metrics on how easy it would be for us to offset our cost in changing the ordinance by the reduction of runoff that we see within our waterways. I don't know how you would come up with those metrics, but I'm sure there's,
Engineer about that one.
yes, I'm sure there's someone real creative who can do that. And so I can only see this as a benefit for the city, especially with the amount of money that we have spent and continue to spend and will continue to spend with the creek situation. And so it makes perfect sense to me for us to continue with it. It makes perfect sense to me for us to even incentivize it within our, especially with our new builds. You know, I'd like to see what that would look like on how we could incentivize, you know, some of our bigger developers to look at those permeable spaces, kind of like what we did with the commercial properties back last year. I'd like to see that on a residential side as well, because I think there'd be a lot of interest. With the single material, the continuous, I did have a little question on that, because the first two pictures that you showed us, they are not continuous. They have a difference, because it's the concrete pad mixed with the
Correct.
well,
In this case,
just like with that. So for me, I love the aesthetics on that. I love the aesthetics on the
The wording continues, you are correct.
Yeah.
There
And-
will be this picture.
So I would like to see us be a little lenient, you know, and I would hope that an engineer would be able to advise us on how we could, or maybe Pete can, because he knows all of our legalese on how we could word it to where,
There's definitely a way we
you
can
know,
word this. Yes,
so that
let's
the engineering is good behind it, but at the same time.
Keep the
we could-
aesthetics of.
Yeah,
so that's good.
because I've seen that where they've done the, you know, the concrete pads and then they've got the,
Strips of grass.
yeah,
So if
around
I can
it.
do it mine, so
Yeah, it's
everybody's
so
fine with that
pretty
direction.
and they designed that so well. I'd love to do something like that. So, you know, I would like for us to be as open as possible, because gosh knows the limits that we have right now when we build these ordinances, you know, they'll come up with 5,000 different creative ways to do it, you know, a year from now. And so I know that we've encouraged, you know, the sunset rules with our ordinances so that we reevaluate them, you know, every 3 to 5. But with the sustainability advances moving so quickly, I would want us to lean more on being a little more open to allow for that kind of change in technology and change in engineering.
Or
So,
low impact development.
Yeah.
For
yep.
green infrastructure. Okay.
Councilmember Rowe.
Councilmember.
I agree with everybody. I think this is a good idea to continue to
Okay.
go down, to proceed down. And the only concerns that I just had is, you know, what the cost expectation would be, which I think some other council members have already mentioned, and just kind of like what the lifespan is compared to regular concrete and
Okay.
things like that. And I think you touched on something that I was kind of thinking of as well, which is some way to incentivize people who maybe want to redo their driveways to make it a little bit more sustainable. And to pivot a little bit, kind of a little bit of what we talked about, John, was in the west side, or in the east part of my district, on the west side of the city. In District 1, there seems to be an issue with overcrowding, and there may be issues like that in other areas as well. But there's a lot of overcrowding issues, and then there are certain individuals who live on really busy intersections who can't really park more than 2 cars, and sometimes they may have a third or a fourth. I mean, our ordinances allow for up to 5. It's not, you know, my job to say 5 is too many or not enough or whatever, but point is, we allow 5, and that would make it very difficult for someone to have even 3 vehicles, because, for instance, there's a gentleman who lives on Dennis and Josie, and there are some ordinance issues that prohibit him from being able to.
Imagine the right turn lane right in front of his driveway. I think
Yes,
that's
and there are some ordinances that prohibit him from being able to expand his driveway or to move it somewhere else. And so I think kind of pivoting a little bit, maybe we can use these options to find something creative to give some relief to at least those people who live on those busy corners, but then maybe there's some way we can loop this idea in with helping with the overcrowding in the streets and the parking issues that we're experiencing in the city.
So your issue that you're bringing up there, I guess, is on-street parking, and can we find ways to reduce that?
Yeah, you know,
Okay.
I was just in California and I was like, you know, what is it that people do in other cities? And so I'm driving around and I see that people have paved their entire thing, and they've added trees and all kinds of stuff to continue with the greenery and make it nice and appealing, but they've essentially paved a majority of their front yards, which that would be a problem given our current ordinances. And I understand that maybe one of the issues why we have those ordinances is to prevent runoff issues. But if we're presenting this as an option, then maybe we can check the runoff box and say, hey, this is not a concern now if we're putting something sustainable such as this in place. So to allow people to expand in their driveway. So that's kind of where I was going with it. But I just kind of wanted to say, yes, I'm in support of it. Here are my concerns. And maybe down the road, here's where we can look at maybe pivoting a little bit to lump in a few other issues to help address them.
Got it. I was giving a little bit of heads up on your comment. So try to pull up the zoning ordinance to see, and probably one was just letting the resident know they're allowed to have 67% of their front yards allowed to be concrete, just so that, and maybe it'll already create some of that, address some of those challenges you just mentioned, but we'll
Right.
certainly kind of think about the issue you just brought up and see if there's any other options we can come up with to
Right.
create parking. All right, is there anything on these you hated? So don't spend any more time on that. Oh, come on, y'all, look at them.
It looks good, Shane.
Options. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough, you'll see me again here in a few minutes.
Thank you very much. A4, project cost estimate update for possible November 2022 bond election.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, Mike Mashburn, Director of Parks and Recreation. All right. So on May 3rd, we were here and we discussed several projects that were brought up at the strategic retreat by City Council. At that point, everyone here seemed to like most of those, so they asked to go ahead and get out true cost on what those may cost for a quality of life bond to be brought back in November. So I'm here with the cost that we had as far as estimates are concerned. Please don't fall out of your chair when you see the first slide. So the first project we talked about was Farmers Branch Park. That was supposed to be a $3 million project. The cost for what you saw was estimated at $16.2 million. The architect we used is usually reasonably accurate with their estimates. They were given a directive of a $3 million solution. I'm still not sure how we were so far off on that, but I do have some ideas on how to get that down and be a little bit more feasible. Squire Park came in at 2.7. That was estimated right around 2.5, so that's in line with what we thought. The Branch Connection exterior, which was the park that you had seen, active space, that's at $4 million. I think that's a little high as well, but that was the estimate that was given. Trex Pathway was 1.5, and that's exactly what we had said at that time. The barn, phase 2, so this was the second portion of the barn that was about 2,500 square feet of conditioned space that would be used for classrooms and various projects. That was estimated at $500,000, so that was less than we had thought. And the Recreation Center exterior, that would kind of bring the look of the building and tie it all together as a phase 3, perhaps next year, was $1 million solution for a total of $25.9 million. Now, when we see that number, I think we can all agree that that's not palatable and that's something we would not at all pursue. So I like to bring two options because I always like at least 2 to 3 options. So the second option, our team took a discerning look at all the costs and what we could maybe do in-house and how we can find creative solutions. For those that are new to council, we're able to do this because we do have a parks construction team. We do have people that build, that weld, that do demo. And so we reasonably know what things can cost and what they should cost. Now, admittedly, the prices that you've seen, the architects are hedging their bets a little bit because if we use them for the project, they don't want to be on the hook for something they can't deliver in a variable environment that we're seeing today. So Farmers Branch Park, I think we can do something similar to what we saw, maybe not the huge grand entryway, maybe not all every field's lit, and certainly not the synthetic turf fields that we saw, but we can probably do something pretty similar for about $6 million. Squire Park, I think we can get that down to 2 on that and still get a pretty spectacular park out of it. The exterior at the branch connection, I think that's something we can really help out as far as demo is concerned and as far as laying some of those elements that you had seen there for 1.2 million. Trex pathway, we can't do much about that. That's what that is. The barn phase 2, I struck through that and there's a reason for it. I like to do things that are well thought out and that we have a plan for and that we know are going to be successful. And we have a long history of doing that over the last several years. What I'd like to do is get the first phase of the barn up and going, make sure that that's successful, which I think it will be, prove the value with the revenue that comes in, and if that is successful, then that money can cover the cost of a phase 2 down the road. Again, it's not a crazy high price, $500,000, but I'd rather commit to that at some point once we know the first phase is successful, but that's for you all to decide. The rec center exterior, that's at $1 million. For a total of $11.7 million. So that's probably just a shade over a penny on our tax rules. So those are options for you all to decide. You can tell me you love it, you hate it, go back to the drawing board. But time is of the essence if this is going to be a November bond election. So I'll open that up for discussion.
Councilman Roman, I'll start with you this time.
Can you kind of explain, I've never done a bond before, participated in one. Can you sort of explain kind of where we are right now and where we're headed for it to kind of, just so I can understand the timeline until the point where it, you know, if this continues forward, it ends up on the ballot for people to vote on?
Sure. So you and I are in the same group. I've never done one either, but I do believe John has some information for you.
Yeah, we would have to call an election for November by August 16th. We happen to have a council meeting on that day. Don't have a ton of time. We have one meeting, at least right now, we have one meeting in July. We do have a joint meeting with planning and zoning. We could stay afterward and talk more about it. But we would need to make a decision fairly quickly if we were going to put this on the November ballot. In terms of the impact on the tax rate, you know, we're still getting our preliminary values. We think this is about 1/2 cent based on the current valuations that we're seeing for this year. We think it would be about 1/2 penny on the tax rate. So I know Robert has advocated, you know, if we go forward with this in this budget, build that in where we could absorb that, and we think we could absorb 1/2 penny for this. So it would be, if the voters wanted to go forward with this, I think we can bake that into the budget without that impacting your tax rate. Should it pass, there's about a 30-day cure after that, just in case somebody needs to protest the election. We would get funded probably, technically at the end of December, but realistically the first part of January. I know, Michael, you would prioritize some of those projects in terms of, you know, I don't know if we would issue the entire $10 million at that time, or you can do it in 2 different tranches, get this part of it done, and then issue the next part when we're ready to do that.
And historically, given I'm the elder statesman here, you know, we have staged the funding of that over time, which helps us reduce the actual amount of the impact in the budget, because, you know, as we continue to grow, as we issue more debt, it comes on over time, and so it's not as big of an impact if we were to take it all in year one. So this could be part of that program and how we want to look at it. I do want to say, when we brought this up in April, you know, the council at that time, you know, kind of unanimously was like, let's potentially move forward to this being a bond election so that we can let the residents decide, because this is going to impact so many parts of our city. And so one of the things is, you know, I've asked is to come back, show us where we're at, because when you see that $16 million on Farmers Branch Park, you know, that's a lot. But in my opinion, a lot of this started with that park, because I've been alive for 38 years, and that park has almost looked the same for 38 years. And so I assume that over time, we need to update that park. And, you know, to be honest, District 1, in terms of park, hasn't gotten the most amount of love, and this package puts a lot of that in there. You know, an area that is close to the station area, I-35 corridor, it's an area for Builders of Hope, things like that, where there's a lot of investment over there. And I think adding to these parks and other things can help with that overall vision and plan of where we want to go. And so, what I kind of want to do is, we've all heard the great news about our AAA rating in July, at our meeting on the 19th. At that time, assuming we have a lease ready to go, I think we'll be in a position to take action, which will come with a known rate. Would that be the case?
Yep.
So knowing that, we might have some kind of idea of what a rate on this might look like and allow us to better project. The fact that we don't have to do anything until August 16th, we have some time and some windows, and if we need to meet in between then, as we're going through budget and other stuff, as I said, the goal would be to absorb this and do some other creative things to help our residents out. But I think this would be a boost to a lot of areas and impact a lot of people in our city, because it's a lot of different facilities in a lot of areas throughout the community. So, we have time. It doesn't need to be decided today, but I think, which direction do we want to go in terms of potentially a dollar amount, so that maybe Mr. Mashburn and the team can come back with some better visuals of what 6 million versus 16 million looks like, and what we might be looking at on our bang for our buck, and whether we want to decide to, add or drop some of the things and get this number down. I think we have some time to do that and bring it back at that time, but I do want to have this conversation now, because if it's a hard no from everybody, I also don't want to waste anyone's time on stuff. And so that was kind of the point of bringing this back at that update, because given that time commitment, basically 45, 50 days, well, a little less than 2 months to ultimately make a decision, but for us to kind of have an idea of where we're going, I think that's important, because we're going to be very busy during budget season. So that's kind of the point here, and I'm not trying to stop you. I was just trying to add some clarity and some additional color to Mr. Land's points. So back to you.
Yeah, and I think, we've talked about, what I've heard is it may be a 0.5 cent increase in the tax rate. And I think what really resonates with people is, as they're making an informed decision, should this move forward, I think they'd appreciate having something that would show, here's kind of what, the taxable value is across different properties, and what it actually means that's coming out of your pocket. I think that really will help people make an informed decision.
It is not gonna, I'm sorry, Vernon, it's not gonna impact their tax rate. That's not what he's talking about with the we're not saying we're gonna increase their tax rate by 0.5 cent, by 0.5 point.
Well, I mean, if we did nothing, no one's
Right.
decided what we're going to do. But I think what Councilmember Roman wants is, what does 0.5 cent equate to the average home value
Right.
each year, so that someone can say, these new parks are costing me $7 a year. I can wrap my head around
Yeah,
that.
whatever,
Right, but we're not,
if there is an increase.
but they're not increasing, but that's not, I think what Vernon thinks is happening is that we're saying to offset this bond, we're gonna increase the tax rate, the property tax rate. And we're not saying that the 0.5 cent is the impact on the taxes, not that we're increasing. The bond is not to increase the tax rate.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
Right, I don't want you to think that that's what we're calling for, is an increase on taxes, because we're not asking for an increase in the tax rate with the bond. We're just, what he's explaining is that it's a 0.5 cent in the tax.
So maybe let me just put it this way, then, whatever it represents in the actual tax rate, I think it might be helpful to have, here's what it will cost in a dollar amount, so that people can put a value to it, and either it's too much or it's too little. Because what I would argue is, of course, I ran my campaign on lowering taxes, and so what I would argue is like, well, if, we had extra money to do all these things, if we don't do them, then what am I saving? And maybe it's something that people are like, well, I'd rather save X amount of money, or I'm fine with expending X amount of money. And the other thing is, as I talk to residents about the bond and gauge interest, there are some concerns that people have brought up, which are valid. Namely, them being that they'd like to feel like there's a more direct impact to the improvement of their quality of life. And I think, yes, one could argue, well, the park that's in your area is now improved, and they're like, yeah, but what about our streets? What about our community? My home? There are several things that I think we can maybe devote funds to and help address those things that have more direct impacts on the taxpayer than a park. The other concern that I have is also just kind of the volatility that we're experiencing in the market right now. I feel like the construction costs and everything that we may purchase is kind of like a moving target. And while, we don't know if it's 16 million now and it'll be 24 tomorrow, who knows? But that's one thing that I'm sort of concerned about as well, and promising people here the things that we're going to deliver and then not being able to do it for things that are outside of our control. And then having to put in more money, and then people were like, well, you promised us that you weren't going to put any more money in this, that it was this, and then it ended up being more. So those are sort of the concerns that I have, and if we have an opportunity to give people a little bit of relief during a time where inflation is at a 40-year high, then I would err on the side of doing that, and maybe doing these parks at a different time. I think it's a great idea, and I love all these things, but I also kind of want to be very fiscally responsible. So at the moment, and I'll hear what the other discussion is, but at the moment, I am not in support of it.
I'm going to take a different route. With the bond election, you're giving the residents the option. So it becomes their decision. And so instead of us making the decision for them on what they want or what they don't want, that's the whole point of a bond election, is to say, look, is this important to you? These are the areas. As far as, relief on their properties, there's not going to be any way for a city to offer that kind of relief, that kind of programming on an individual's property values, on an individual's property improvements. And so these, when the council at the strategic planning meeting brought these things to Mike, and Mike discussed these with us, these were all things that residents had brought to us. These were all areas that the residents were concerned with as well, and that's why we wanted to look forward. And so having a bond election is a perfect way of saying, okay, residents, instead of me sitting up here at this table with 5 other elected officials and saying, this is what we think is important to you, this gives them the opportunity to say, yeah, this is important to us, and this is where we want funding to go. Or, no, it doesn't. And then the bond doesn't get passed, and we heard our residents, and we let everyone have a voice. That's why I think it's a great idea. Mike, for me, it's startling to go from a $25.9 or $26 million project and then say, no, we can do it for 11. So, what does the difference between a $16.2 million Farmers Branch Park and a $6 million, how did we come up with those numbers?
Yeah, that's the tricky one. So like I said, we have a construction crew on, and so when the architects came back with who they solicited bids from, we went line by line and said, okay, this is at $500,000. We already have irrigators on that can take care of this or whatever, right? We went line by line, and what we totaled up was about $6 million that we could do it for. I do think $16 million was an insane amount of money. I think part of that is that huge grand entryway that you had seen, right?
Yeah.
The lid thing and all the sign, and that stuff gets real expensive because it spanned from one side to the other.
Sure.
A lot of times too, lighting can be an issue. There's solar lighting that can happen that can reduce ongoing costs on a regular basis. Certainly some of it can be offset through rental fees or whatever, but that's going to be minimal when you're talking about this much money. But I do think we can make an impact for $6 million. That gives us the flexibility when we rework the whole space to eventually, if we wanted to one day, add synthetic turf fields. So that's roughly $1 million a field there that would be shaved off of that. Maybe the pickleball courts aren't lit right now. Maybe they're not all shaded with that beautiful cantilever shading. We've learned this on projects before. When you give, I don't want to speak too much, but when you give architects carte blanche, like a blank check, right? And you say, hey, design what your imagination can give you. A lot of times you can achieve the same finish and look for like a third of the price, right?
Sure.
And I think Kevin can attest to that. We've found that before. It's like this beautiful tile from Italy is like 10 times more than it could be locally sourced. So I think we can do something pretty nice for $6. It probably would cut out that big entryway, but we could still do a nice entryway.
Perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. Well, and I like the idea of saying, hey, let's be reasonable, and 16 does not seem as reasonable. Let's be reasonable and still give us, the opportunity to go back in later and make other improvements as budgets see fit. But yeah, I think a $16 million park would be a hard sell for anyone right now.
Big time
so.
hard. And I think a good example, just on a smaller level, was the dog park when we
Yeah.
originally did that. That was a $250,000 project. That was something we took a look at internally, designed internally with our board and several community members, and then did it with our in-house staff and some creativity. And so, I mean, really, if you went out to bid and had that park built somewhere else, I mean, that's easily over $1 million. So I think that's a good example of how we can kind of value engineer some things.
Perfect. The only thing that I might look at in addition to this, speaking to Omar's point, that there are some other infrastructure issues. I know lighting is, street lighting is one of those things, and in those areas. I know Robert and I had talked about that even at one point, and so I think that might be something worth looking at, especially to give to the residents that, hey, when we talk about quality of life, we're not just talking parks. These are some other areas that, that we could look at. And so I'd be interested in seeing that, especially if we were to go with the second option where we're bringing it to a more palatable approach, taking out the phase 2 on the barn. That I think lighting in those areas might be something worth looking at as well.
Councilmember Jackson.
So, thank you, Mike. I agree with Tracy that, the decision here today is to put it in front of voters, let voters decide. Love that part. If this was about COs, I'd hands down be no. But this is about a bond election, so I favor that part of it. But to go back to a couple of the comments that council members Roman and Williams had made about bringing a more direct impact into our neighborhoods, I really think we need to focus on that a little bit more. Because we call this a quality of life bond, but it's not quality of life if you have concrete trucks doing 45 miles an hour down your street, or you have other cars speeding on the street, or a street's completely dark at night, or there's no sidewalks where people can't engage and interact in their own neighborhoods without risking getting run over. I think we need, as a council, as a staff, need to look at that in more detail and more deeply so that our spending becomes more meaningful to the residents and hits directly in the neighborhood. So that's one point. The other is financial. How does another $12 or $25 million in bonds impact our AAA bond rating? We're currently carrying 50 million plus in debt now. We're going to take on another 25 or so with the sports complex, understanding it's going to be paid for by STAR's contract, but still, it's on our credit report. And now we're looking at more bond debt. So at what point do we say, okay, we may have resources to pay our bond debt service, but we've reached a point now where there's too much. So not a question we have to answer today, but to piggyback on that, the perception of the spending concerns me, particularly as we have one more quarter of negative GDP. We're officially in a recession, but most would argue right now we're in a recession. Food costs have gone up 25% over the past year. Producer cost index has gone up over 10%. So more price increases are coming on food, right? Basic needs. Gas, no need to expand on that. We know what's going on at the pump, right? So just generally the perception of our spending as a city with our taxpayers' dollars or on the credit of our taxpayers' dollars is giving me a little bit of heartburn today. And with respect to this particular item, 12 million or 25 million, doesn't matter. But add in the 5 million that we're already spending from ARPA funds on a new park, and all the other money that we're spending on parks. Our park tab is substantial. I mean, substantial. And so, as a council member, as a new council member, I'd like to see what our park bill looks like right now. I know it's in the budget from last year, and, you know, there's maintenance costs, upkeep, there's repairs, and that kind of thing, but we're talking about a whole bunch of brand-new shiny stuff here with our existing dollars and with our credit limit. And I kind of feel like we need to tap the brakes a little bit at the risk of, you know, not spending too much time. I just feel like I need some more education sort of on where all that stands.
Councilmember Mayor?
These are tough pills to swallow. The numbers are very big. However, as we've already talked about, the opportunity to have the residents vote on this is the right thing to do. I think we need to be judicious in the timeframes that we have coming forward to look at how we're spending that $6 million across that particular project. It went from 16 to 6, we understand that, but we need to have some more detail. We as the council, and therefore the communication, needs to be brought around. There's more to digest in this, and Richard, you're right, there's a lot of factors going on, but we do operate the city for the benefit of our residents and our visitors and our businesses. So we do have to have some amenities, and therefore if you don't, you don't attract those things. So there's a trade-off. It's a different, we're not running our own households. You know, if I don't want to eat at, you know, some fancy restaurant, I choose not to. This is a city, we have to try to meet all the needs from top to bottom. And it's difficult, it's a balance, and I get it's difficult to find that balance. But I think our due diligence here is to understand these projects and make sure that we have the right projects on the board. We've been here for months talking about these projects, so I think these are the right projects. I appreciate the deletion or the offset, if you will, of the barn phase 2. I think that's right at this point. And as you said, allowing the barn to be a success in its own right. I look forward to that. I think the opportunities there are very good. The one that I might look at here is the recreation center exterior. Obviously, getting the interior, that's where the people use the facility. That may be the best, you know, utilization of our money. We have those 2 items on tonight's agenda. That might be one. And then, as others have promoted, there might be some other way to potentially spend $1 million, $2 million, if you will, on something else to bring this together. But time is of the essence here. We've heard that we have an August 16th, you know, decision point to get this on for a November ballot. So we're gonna have to do our homework as a group here. The staff will have to do their due diligence. But I think this is something that we need to move forward on, to put it out there with the best communication. And communication from the day I sat here is super important. We've got to tell the best story and the most accurate story that we can and allow the people to make their decisions at the ballot box. And so I want to make sure that we tell everything. So the 6 million is sort of nebulous at the moment. Yes, I know you've done some back office, you know, calculations with your teams, and that's great. But we're going to have to blow that out and communicate more about that.
So with that, I don't know how much more accurate I can give you because they've already bid this out and it was a 16.2.
Sure.
And so they're gonna come back and say, well, you can have nothing. I mean, really, unless we formally bid the projects and draw up specs and everything else, so it's gonna be tough to get you much more than here's what.
But I think from a line item perspective, what does $6 million buy me? Does it buy me one shiny thing, or does it buy me 100 shiny things? I think that's the level of, description that I would be looking for. Obviously, the 16.2, line item, you referenced that you went through, and could we do ourselves? I think that's the level of detail that this body would like to see. Therefore, we can craft the appropriate communication to the public so they could understand that as well. So, thank you.
All right, I have a few comments and then we'll move on because this will most likely be coming back in different fashions because we have some time. 90% of the home values, about $350,000 in the city of Farmers Branch. So a half cent would be $17.50. So give or take 90% of the people, that would be their effect. I think coming up in the budget, we've been having a lot of conversations. I think there's some things that I'm going to propose that can help not only offset this cost with the tax rate, but some other opportunities that might be able to alleviate some of the stresses that people are dealing with now in terms of rising inflation, home values, things like that. One of the things that I didn't see on here, you touched on it in terms of what we're doing as a community in terms of, making an impact in a neighborhood, in terms of streets. Over the last several years, we have done an amazing job building that street budget up to where hopefully we don't have to go out for bonds to fix these like we did in the past. We can reevaluate where we are. Obviously, every year costs go up, so we'll probably have to tweak that number a little bit, but we have it in a very healthy spot. And that was a priority of councils in the past and something that we're going to push for going forward. But in terms of what I didn't see up here, which I did see previously, is the medians. And not only that, I'd love to address our medians on our main thoroughfares, but I'd also potentially want to have a conversation about, do we own and operate our own streetlights? There's some offsets there with what we have to pay currently to get the aging equipment that we have. And in terms of how fast the LED lights are being upgraded and some of those other things, not moving as fast as I was like. That was a priority of the Quality of Life Committee that was formed in 2016, that we went out to the 2017 bond with. It's literally the last item that has not been addressed. And so maybe addressing some of that addresses some of these things, and kind of that's parks. What do our medians look like? How beautiful are they? What standard do we want them? Maybe that's a conversation with sustainability parks, others as we look to do that, but something that might be able to be rolled into here as well to do in one fell swoop as well, that truly makes those impacts in our streets, in our community, and in the appearance of Farmers Branch as people move through. So, we can touch on that later. I'm not here to discuss all that today, but I appreciate everyone's comments and points. This helps us as we look to potentially go forward with this. There will be other rounds of conversation. So, Mr. Mashburn, thanks for the presentation, and I'm sure we'll be back in July to talk about this again. And maybe in August. Who knows? We'll see. We'll see where everyone sits at that time. We're missing a fellow member who's in Germany right now. I'm sure he'd love to weigh in as well. So, all right, next up is A5, receive an update on the June 2nd, 2022 windstorm.
All right, thank you, Council. My name is Luke Parton. I'm the Emergency Management Specialist for the city. I'm just going to talk about the June 2nd windstorm and then kind of do a quick overview of emergency management, and then we'll move on to some disaster permitting stuff that we're working on. All right, so we'll go over the windstorm, how the city actually responded to it, an overview of emergency management, elected officials in emergency management, so how you all interact with me. And then disaster permitting process that we're working on. So a quick overview. This event happened obviously on June 2nd. It started to impact the city around 4:30 in the morning. That's kind of when the bad part of the storm got to us. It was already raining a little bit, but that's when the strong wind started. So what the National Weather Service determined that it was a microburst or a downburst. They're not exactly sure what caused it. It could have been a convergence, could have been a collapsing storm. They don't really know, but that's basically what caused it. And you can see that kind of graphic of what a downburst is. So a lot of air coming down, it hits the earth, spreads out really fast. They estimated at around 70 to 75 miles an hour. It could have been more than that, but it would have been kind of localized. That was generally the wind speeds for the most part. Unfortunately, with these kinds of storms, they're nearly impossible to predict. So National Weather Service, they didn't know it was going to be happening. Even if you're sitting there staring at the radar that the National Weather Service has, they have a lot more radar than I have available to myself, but you can't really see it coming. So it's quite unfortunate. It caused a lot of tree breakage, as we all know, around the city, a lot of down power lines. Unfortunately, it caused some damage to our residences and to a few businesses in the city. We are fortunate that it wasn't a lot stronger storm and it didn't cause more damage, but it did cause a little bit, which is a little bit unfortunate. So after talking to Encore during the storm, we did have about 1,600 housing units that lost power. About half of those were restored within 24 hours. There were some that were without power through Saturday, maybe into Sunday, but the majority of those were restored within 24 hours. And they were dealing with outages across their whole system, so it wasn't just Farmers Ranch that was being affected. So our response to the event, for the fire department specifically, we responded to over 26 storm-related calls out of the 52 total calls for the day. We also were out doing initial damage assessment, driving the streets, looking for the damage that actually happened, and then also assisting residents. And kind of for context, you can see our normal daily call volume is about 17 calls for the branch. And so quite a few more that we were getting during that event. With emergency management, with myself, we were coordinating with National Weather Service, figuring out what exactly happened, kind of narrowing down the area that they had to look at, because they have a ton of radar data, so they kind of want to know the general area. So we were working with people out in the field doing damage assessment and feeding them that information, saying, hey, here's where we're seeing damage. And they're like, okay, yeah, we see it right there. They can start to look at pictures and start to determine exactly what happened. Then also working with our Quad City partners. So we were with Carrollton, Addison, and Coppell, working with them. They were kind of giving us updates on what was happening in their cities. And then we were also gathering damage assessment information from residents. So we used a damage assessment tool that's put out by the state. I believe we only received 9 responses to that. I will admit it is a little bit cumbersome, that specific survey that we used. We are working on a better one that's a lot easier for our residents to use, and it'll help encourage, prevent them from being overwhelmed, saying, I'm not going to do it. So it'd be easier for them to get us that information. Police department, they responded to over 28 alarm calls and 8 traffic hazards. I'm sure there were a lot more that were not necessarily recorded. They're out there driving the streets all the time. They see stuff and they can help us out with that. Sustainability, they are currently still picking up storm-related debris from residences and the rights of way. This storm, it did generate a lot of storm-related debris, so we are still working on that. I know Shane's going to talk about that here in just a minute, so I'll let him speak more specifically about that. Public Works, they did conduct roadway debris clearance, so anything that's in a roadway, we are responsible for clearing that out, especially because we want emergency vehicles to be able to get through there. And then repairing traffic lights. We did have a few traffic lights that sustained damage. They were able to get those back up and working very quickly. Parks, they came out and they initially assisted Public Works with the debris, roadway debris clearance. And then also, once they got all the roads cleared, they started going back through and clearing the sidewalks so that people could actually get out there and start walking around. And then they were able to begin clearing our city parks of any debris. City manager's office, they were very helpful with, they were also out there doing the initial damage assessment with our guys, and they were able to work with MetroCrest to get some of our uninsured or underinsured residents some extra help to recover from this. And I actually do want to point out Councilmember Roman for helping us during that. You got us a lot of information, passing along information from your residents in your district that needed our help. So thank you for the help that you did during that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go a quick overview of emergency management. So it is a critical function that we do as a government. You can see the 4 phases down there: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So that's what we do in emergency management. We're preparing for, responding to, and recovering from disaster. We do have an all hazards approach to this, so we don't necessarily have a tornado plan and an earthquake plan. Might actually happen here now. So we have kind of an all hazards. So we say, if there's a power outage, here's what we do. If we have loss of communication, here's what we do. So that's kind of how we approach emergency management. So we have an emergency operations center. It's located at Fire Admin. We'll get to that here in just a minute. And so that's kind of like the hub of the emergency response. So we get all our stakeholders there, fire, police, public works, public health, sustainability, everybody there, a stakeholder from each department, so that we can better coordinate our response. And what we're trying to do is create a common operating picture, so that everyone's operating based on the same information. We don't have different separated pods of people that are trying to accomplish the same thing, but they're out there competing for the same resources, stuff like that. So we are able to kind of coordinate all of that from the Emergency Operations Center. So how y'all interact with emergency management. I believe y'all should have gotten the elected officials guide. Please read through that. This is kind of just a real brief overview. If you have any questions about it, please reach out. I really like emergency management, so please talk to me about it. So y'all do play a critical role in public safety, emergency management, and disaster response, all the way from mitigation, preparedness, response, all the way through recovery. So kind of before, during, and after is what I wanted to go over with y'all. So before a disaster, please come visit the Emergency Operations Center. We will be doing a training later this fall, and we're going to have everything all set up for y'all. So if y'all want to, y'all can come out and kind of tour the EOC and see what all of it's about and everything like that. And we'll set that up with y'all at a later date. Review the emergency operations plan and any other emergency plans that we might have. If y'all would like them, let one of us know, and we can get you those plans so that you can review them, so that you're not going into a disaster response completely blind, because that does not facilitate anything. Also encourage everyone to develop an emergency plan, so all of your constituents, encourage them to have some kind of plan in place. And then be aware of your hazards. In your elected officials guide, you'll see a hazard vulnerability analysis. So we looked at all the different hazards that we face in Farmers Branch and kind of ranked them based on their impact and severity and all that kind of stuff, and likelihood. Obviously, we're not going to get impacted by a hurricane, so that's really low on the list. So also attend trainings. There's some trainings that y'all can do if y'all would like to. They are online, really easy. Go at your own pace. If you want to do those, then I'd be more than happy to get you the information on those. So during a disaster, y'all do, as I said, play a critical role in our response. So what we really want you to do is kind of work through the city manager, Mr. Land, and kind of communicate concerns that you're getting from not just yourselves, but anybody in your district or any other residents that you're talking to. And then any questions that they have, and just anything that you need to know about the response to the incident. You can interface with your constituents, so talk to them. Chances are, if they have a problem, they're going to reach out to you, and then you can let us know, and we can address their problems. Approve any disaster declarations that are longer than 7 days. So I know after a disaster, the mayor can declare a disaster. There's certain criteria that we have to, follow with that, but that disaster declaration is only good for 7 days. After that, it expires unless it's ratified by the city council. So if that is something that is necessary, then that would be something that we would need y'all to do for us. Coordinate with the city manager to ensure we're presenting a coordinated message. So that's really important. We don't want 10 different people saying 10 different things. We want everybody to be on the same page, saying the same thing, even putting out the same graphics or exact same wording to messages. And then attend briefings at the council conference room. That could be in here, that could be in the conference room at fire admin, or it could even be teleconference. We're fortunate that we have the infrastructure for that now. That's basically so that we can get the policy that, or the kind of how we're gonna be responding to disaster. And then in the EOC, we can create the operational picture, and then guys out in the field, they'll actually do the tactical picture. So after disaster, make sure you kind of understand the declaration process and how that works with getting reimbursed, stuff like that. Support your community. Y'all are very important to helping everybody in our city, all the residents, with recovering, get them information, connect them with who they need to be connected with. And then you can help identify any opportunities we have for funding, whether that's reimbursement or just different grants that come available. After disaster, there's tons of money out there. We just have to find it and apply for it. So that's a really good way to help fund the response and the recovery from a disaster. So before we jump into the permitting process, were there any questions about the response or about emergency management as a whole? No? Okay, well, I'm going to turn it over to Danielle. She'll talk about the disaster permitting that we're coming up with.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Danielle Summers, Deputy Director of Community Services. I have a policy that we have created for disaster events with permits, and so I'm going to go over quickly with our policy so that I'm sure you guys are ready for dinner or close to it. So the intent of our policy is to provide a guideline to process permits with a disaster declaration that the mayor will give us. All the disaster declarations will come from him, and then we decide how to proceed if this is an event that requires a special permit, or if we just continue on with, like, for example, the one that we just had, we used electrical permits. Most of the damage was electrical. And so when this happens, we will communicate with communications department, put things on our website, whatever avenue we can get information out that we're available to assist you. And with permits, if you know, certain criteria, depending on what kind of damage you had, if you need a permit, try to get that information out the best that we can and let them know that we're available to help them out, you know, as fast as we can. Of course, people are going to be upset and they want timely service, and so we're going to be available to help them through that as much as possible. Permit technicians receive the permits in through our permit system, and they will process them immediately. A lot of our permits are over the counter. Electrical permits, plumbing permits, mechanical permits, fencing permits can be over the counter, several ones like that, so they process those immediately. If there's a bigger disaster that involves a house falling down or something major, a tree fell down on a house and it needs major repairs, that does take a permitting process. It takes plans to be submitted on how the repair is going to take place. We will use our expediting process that we have in place. We'll speed it up a little bit to try to get it done in maybe 1 to 4 days, depending on the magnitude, and we will waive our expediting fee. Currently, we require an expediting fee of double the permit fee, of whatever the charge is to get it done, expediting, moving you up in front of other projects if you're willing to pay the fee, and it's 7 days. For this kind of disaster, we will move it from 1 to 4 the best that we can, depending on the magnitude. We'll work with trying to get damage assessment reports with the EOC or other departments that have been involved, Public Works, Building Department, Sustainability, anybody that's been involved with doing damage assessment will gather those reports to kind of figure out what areas that we need to assist the most and the quickest. Building inspections will also work with contractors to get these permits inspected as quickly as possible. We had an inspector that came out on a Saturday to help with some inspections. So that is available. Typically after hour and weekend inspections are at a cost, and so we waive those fees to kind of help, you know, and when somebody doesn't have electricity, they need their electricity. So we work with them. We try to work with Encore the best that we can, coordinate with them to try to get the residents up and running again and in their homes. see. So one of the things that we will do is typically our permits for the expediting for a natural disaster will run for about approximately 15 days, depending on the magnitude of the disaster. If it's something, a tornado that took down a whole city block or something like that, it would be different. We'll work with you as city council or the mayor or city manager's office to figure out, do we need to extend this time? To give you a little example of kind of the process, I went through and looked at like the major snowstorm that we had in '21. We did a declaration or what, a process for 30 days for plumbing permits, and we waived the fees. We had 5. So I looked at that whole time frame of any kind of plumbing permits or anything that had to do with that system, and we had 5 permits that we issued. One was to a homeowner, and the other 4 were to contractors. This electrical vent that we had, we issued 12 permits, and 1 was for a fence, and that was a homeowner permit, so they pulled their own permit. 1 was for a re-roof, that was to a contractor. The other 12 were all electrical, having to repair from trees falling down and pulling their electrical away from their house or something like that. We did 1 homeowner permit, and the rest of them were contractors. So if that helps, if you have any questions, that's our process.
Anyone have any questions at this time?
I guess the only question I had was, the fee to get the permit during this storm, they were not waived.
Correct.
Okay.
So the reason why we don't prefer to do that is because contractors pull their own permits. Contractors typically, 99% of the time, will not pass that savings forward. So that is typically why we don't waive those fees.
I see. Okay.
We also didn't get a disaster declaration either. We were hoping that we got that, because that gives you federal reimbursement, and that never came through, so we weren't able to
Correct.
just uniformly do that.
And then I just wanted to make sure that I thanked John and Ben and the fire department, as well as all of the other staff members who really came out to help. I know it meant a lot to the residents when I was meeting with them, and I went back and checked on them, and they were just thrilled to see the city out there providing support. So thank you guys for that. It really meant a lot to them. That's it.
Does anyone else have anything? Danielle, Luke, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Oh, we got more.
This is what we've all been waiting for.
We have executive session tonight?
We do not.
Okay, so otherwise I'll kind of just go almost straight to discussion, but. So just kind of a quick rundown in terms of solid waste collection. So we have a contractor, CWD, who picks up garbage and recycling. They currently help out with bulk week, but that's done by the human on the back of the truck. So what they help out with is anything less than 50 pounds, or like mattresses, or we give them a cubic size and weight limit. Anything above that, we pick up with the knuckle boom. It helps tremendously during bulk week because a lot of the piles are small. If you look at the grabber, there's a setup time for every stop. So every time it has to stop, it goes to that same set of time. The driver has to get out of the door, go up the elevator that's under the perch, get the outriggers down, get the arm out of the truck, and then it can start picking up. Every time we stop, that time is built into it. I can't change that, so you have that time, plus whatever depends on what your pile is. So if they're small, CWD, the guy jumping off the back of the truck, that's the setup time. How long it takes to get up from the truck to the curb, and then they're working. So the small piles, that helps out tremendously. We did that, I guess, a couple years ago, so we gave up a full-time position to offset the cost for them helping out with bulk and collection. So currently, our staff consists of, today, we're using the Citizens Collection Station guy to help us out, so he's working overtime. So we pulled him in from the CCC last week. We're gonna send him back this week. Staff, thank you for helping out and filling in for the guy last week. So thank you to the other staff, members helped out. Otherwise, there's 3 operators and a supervisor. So right now, I got 4 pieces of equipment out there running around the town. We have 5 routes. Going back to those that may not have been here, maybe a little bit newer, you used to have bulk collection every week. That means bulk was out every week. To me, you had, just sinks, toilets, bulk out every week, whereas now you have it once a month. By switching to the route we did, it allows us to divert the brush material on those other 3 weeks, so it gets recycled, and then fill up a landfill, and it gets turned into a useful product. And then once a month, we do bulk collection. So 5 routes: a Monday route, Tuesday route, Wednesday route, Thursday route, Friday route. Those are all the same day, on a normal week, not a storm week. It mirrors the recycling routes. During storm events, what we do is we start with the Monday route. We work through the entirety of the Monday route. So in this case, Monday route took 2.5 days. Tuesday route, which is around the rec center, that was 7 days for just to get through one route. So we stay on the Tuesday route till we finish Tuesday. Wednesday, west side of Highland 35, there's very little damage out there. That took us 3 hours. Just took our truck to get through and picked up a couple stops, took some of the larger things that were out there, and then we went on Thursday. We've been on Thursday ever since. We are focusing on the Valwood, B Street, Dennis area of the town. That's where we're at. We've been there since Friday. We don't have a third-party contractor for storms or disasters. I reached out to CWD to see if they had any extra. They have a very limited knuckle boom fleet. Most cities, I lived in Carrollton. Carrollton is very similar to us. You can put anything out the curb and we would pick it up there. Most cities give you a size restriction. So the piles can't be any bigger than this for them to pick it up because a person's picking that pile up. Everything else is on your dime. You're gonna pay, so you take down a tree, you're paying the contractor to come in, chip it up and haul it away. That's not what we do here because we have the fleet to do it. But I will say knuckle booms are not cheap to operate. I will say the most expensive piece of thing in our fleet, there's probably sweepers, maybe what's the largest thing they use in the streets to dig up? I don't know if that costs more, but we're up there in terms of the piece of equipment. It's expensive. And that's why a lot of people just don't operate them. They're an expensive piece of machinery. Farmers Branch was essentially a tale of 2 cities with this storm. If you live south of Valley View, it was nothing like what happened north of Valley View. So the picture on the left, that's looking down the street on the south side of Valley View. Picture on the right, that's Hearthstone from yesterday. The picture you saw went on the news clipping was Hearthstone. We just finished picking up that pile probably about an hour and a half ago. But the Hearthstone is what we saw across the entirety of the north side of Farmers Branch. I say north side, I'm talking about north of Valley View. That's why it's taking us so long. This is a GPS, this is yesterday. This is, I say all. That Springvale is this, those who don't know where we are in the city. This is Springvale. That took us from 7 in the morning till 12:30. Each one of those dots represents 2 minutes. It's not good when I see dot on top of dot on top of dot. That's a bad day for the crew. So this is what we managed to get through yesterday. Today we finished up Brandywine, got Hearthstone, and looks like they're gonna finish Wasena. So 3 streets is what we got done today. It's just the sheer magnitude of how many piles are out there and how much is in front of people's houses. This is why it's taking us so long. And I get if you live south of Valley View, wondering, where in the world are we? What's taking us so long? Well, if you go up to these streets and look, this is what's taking us so long to get around the town. Once you get south of Valley View, my expectation is the Thursday route to finish it up is one day, the Friday's route's one day. It's just getting south of Valley View. We're not gonna get south of Valley View today. Hopefully tomorrow we get through everything north of Valley View and we can get down there and make rapid progress. The guys need it for morale left more than anything else, as much as the residents. What it is collected some data. So this is bulk week collection tonnage, city staff and CWD, because I said they help out. So this is up to date in terms of the June tonnage through last Friday. We still have this week to go, and I suspect we've got a fairly large clean brush pile stacked up down there at Keenan Bridge that we still need to haul off to Living Earth for recycling. So it'll be probably 2 more weeks for the total numbers in terms of the storm response for us. There's the number of trips we made to the landfill, that's 77, plus we have 23, because most of this is woody debris. So as long as you didn't stick a toilet in the middle of your pile, if you just had clean brush, because a lot of homes have entire trees down. If we could, we diverted it to Living Earth. But once you mix something else in there, all of it has to go to the landfill. A trip to and from the landfill is at least an hour. Getting up there and back. Living Earth is much quicker. We can probably make a round trip in half an hour. So ideally, we'd love to go to Living Earth as much as possible after a storm event. If you look at the CWD numbers, you see very little change in terms of this month versus last. You just got to get the sheer magnitude of the piles. It's a person picking stuff up. So once you have a tree down, they're not going to be able to help with that. So in terms of their bulk week help, it's pretty minimal. I asked them today and yesterday to help get any small piles that are out there still that we got to on the Thursday and Friday route south of Valley View. But the majority of that just has to be picked up by us. And so between the setup time and just the sheer magnitude This is why it takes so long to collect stuff in the knuckle boom. So go back to your question you asked earlier. These two knuckle booms are a slightly different design. They have a bigger box on the back. What you see now, if you watch the crew work, usually there's a knuckle boom, and often there's a roll-off working in tandem with it. They try to load the roll-off truck first, because that can go to landfill while the knuckle boom stays on the route and keeps collecting. But once you fill up the knuckle boom, you just gotta stop and wait till the roll-off gets back, or you send that to landfill and comes back. So you spend some time parked waiting when you get this much material out there. The new knuckle booms have a bigger truck. We're trying to move to where every piece of equipment is a knuckle boom, no more roll-offs. We can contract out the roll-off service. This will allow more trucks out there picking up stuff. So each one of them, you're not making the trip to landfill with the roll-off truck, but you got more pieces of equipment out there picking things up off the street. It helped tremendously in your area of town with the on-street parking, which you've referenced before. It's slow driving for us, those big trucks, and we get through there, but we kind of creep through those streets. It'd be ideal for situations like that, because we can't ever load that roll-off truck in that part of town, because we can't get beside the other truck. So we gotta go somewhere to a park. A lot of times you'll see them in a parking lot. What are they doing? Well, he's got to transfer the load out of the knuckle boom into that roll-off truck. We go back on the route, pick up wherever we left off. That's a very quick rundown of this. Feel free to ask any questions. Hey, what? I've gotten a lot of the phone calls y'all get. My little tender on my backside, but we're gonna do it. It's not my first storm. I knew what to expect. It usually takes about 2 weeks to get through one of these, and it's not fun for the residents. I get that. It's not fun for the guys either. We want it to be over as fast as anyone else. But any questions I can answer, I'd be more than happy to take your questions.
So when you have a roll-off truck that's going to
Yes, sir.
the landfill, or what was the other place called?
Or living earth, or they turn
Living-
into composting and mulch.
Okay. The knuckle boom truck is continuing to go and pick up stuff and put it in their own container.
Yeah, there's a box on the back.
Okay. Does that box roll off?
That's the thing with our current one, it does not self-tip. So in
Okay.
order to remove all the contents, you gotta use that same arm you used to load it and transfer it that way.
Transfer it over, so
Yes, sir.
there's time, costs involved there.
Correct. So by having this truck, that would speed up that process. We don't have to do the transfer, it's tips, dump all the contents out. It's much quicker in that respect also.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I completely understand the time and the labor intensity that's involved here. I think one of the parts that's sort of, I'll call it misleading with this event, is that not everybody saw
Right.
the damage that was done. I mean, I slept through it, and I looked out the window that morning and thought, well, it rained this morning. And I didn't know until 3 hours later that there were entire streets of crews and trees and trucks and power outages and all kinds of things going on. It was kind of an elusive thing to
Yes.
many people.
I live south of Royal. I woke my wife and I up. We both looked at the storm. I was like, ooh, that's right at the edge of 635. I can see the edge of the storm. And I was like, tomorrow's going to be fun when I get there. I had no idea how bad it was until I got here, but yes.
Yeah.
Valley View seemed to be the dividing line for the city.
And I think partly too, there's some education for residents here, because one thing that you just said that I didn't realize, and I'm trying to think back that I ever do this or have a problem with it, but you put a toilet in the middle of a limb pile or a tree pile, that has to go to landfill. It can't go to living earth and be recycled. And so I would suggest maybe we, put something in a future water bill or something to that effect, because I know of some piles where there's a mixture of lumber, a desk, a bookshelf, and like 2 huge trees. That's all gonna go to the landfill, unfortunately. If the resident had known, they might have separated it.
That's why you see brush diversion trips and most of the other bulk weeks. Most of those piles are always mixed together. It's rare we have enough to actually make it worth a while to try and go to living earth. We'd almost have to send a separate truck through just looking for that, which would be inefficient. Our goal is to try and get that out of your yard as fast as possible.
So that's another question. Do we have a scalp truck perhaps that goes out? and
I have
just-
everybody on heavy equipment.
Okay,
Just when it gets to be this bad, it's just whatever I can do to get picked up.
right.
I try to drive through and just kind of give the guys a heads up, and that's what I was doing the past couple of days. Like, guys, if you can just get to Squire, one, it's just morale. If you can get to the street, your life's gonna start getting better.
Right. So I'm
But
thinking
before
maybe we train Jeff to jump in a small pickup and go out and take notes and pictures. There seems like a process, efficiency opportunity here. that might cause our trucks to run a little bit more efficiently if we had a scout truck, somebody from another area that could make notes, communicate back, tell you, hey, here's a street we need to hit, you know, or.
In this case, it's every street. That's the thing that was
Right.
so widespread north of Valley View. And that's, the Tuesday rec, I went to the rec center to work out. I saw that and was like, oh my goodness, we're gonna be on Tuesday for a while.
Right.
7 days is how long we're on that route.
Right, well, my hat's off to you, I know it's a big job, and you're getting a lot of phone calls, I am too.
I'm sorry, we're doing the best we can, but
Understood, and that's what I'm communicating to folks.
yeah, by the end of this week, barring vehicle breakdown, and that's one of the things we're stressing to the guys too, in the past, we had a lot of vehicle breakdowns, we've changed how we pick things up. We used to try and compact with that claw, that doesn't mix well. Now we just set it in there and go on to the next street. Our uptime has been tremendous. Tom's staff has been great to work with, so we've tried to work together and figure out how can we keep these trucks on the road. There's so many moving parts. Like today, I had a truck go down for a mud flap. I think, why would you just put it down for a mud flap? That's a DOT infraction. If I run it to landfill and the Louisville commercial cops there, guess what? We're getting a ticket. So I had to wait to get a mud flap on. So sometimes little things like that, hoses break, but for the most part, our uptime has been tremendous throughout the storm. I can't thank Tom enough, so.
Good.
Councilmember Merrick?
Shane, thank you, and I know the staff is working overtime and, you know.
They're probably about to wrap up for the day. They started at 7 and just shut down about 5:30.
Appreciate all of their efforts and yours guiding them through. Obviously, I think as we go forward, there's some desire to have some, you know, lessons learned, what we might do differently, we can all armchair quarterback if you'd like. But I'm sure that's on your agenda to do. And I'd certainly, as one member of this, you know, council, be interested to hear what those actionable items are when that time is appropriate, so.
Yeah, this storm's different, like COVID, last time we had tonnages this much was COVID. When everybody's on lockdown, you had nothing else to do, I guess, but clean out your garages, you cleaned up everything. We ran behind like this for those first couple months of COVID, my staff was like, oh my God. So finally, it took 5 to 6 months for we to get back on track and get done in a week, but.
And I know, you know, Richard, you brought up the point that it was exacerbated by it was in certain areas of town. And if we experienced a community-wide event, this is, you know, that plan, you know, changes dramatically. I understand that as well. And I think it's important that our residents realize too, that this is a service that many other communities don't offer.
You're
And
paying
so
for all the stuff that we moved on your own.
This is something that we offer and absorb in our budgets, and that's something, and yes, it's a little inconvenience. A friend of mine across the street, you know, a couple of piles, he's worried about it. Yes, and rightfully so, but it is going to eventually catch up.
Yes.
So, thank you again, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have one more comment, if you don't mind, for the benefit of the residents. This is a real testament to keeping your trees trimmed and cleaned out. You know, not only will it produce less waste, be less dangerous in events like this, but we've heard from residents where Encore that couldn't get down an alley because trees had fallen over and areas not being maintained. I just so happened to have had my 50-year-old oak tree trimmed a week before and cleaned out. So whether or not I would have sustained damage had I not done that, don't know. But it doesn't hurt. Take care of your stuff.
There's certain, yeah, I mean, like the Monday route, we got through that relatively quick compared to the Tuesday routes.
Right.
I just want to say, I want to thank the mayor and council for being supportive of staff. This is, I know you're all getting blown up about why is it taking so long, and our part of the neighborhood has been forgotten. We've tried to communicate with y'all about the effort and the complexity of handling this, and I really appreciate the support. It's very easy to point fingers in times like this when you're getting a finger pointed at you. I want to thank Shane's team, because one thing that wasn't necessarily brought up is we've also been experiencing triple-digit heat. And so we've had crews out there working 10-hour shifts every day trying to catch up and doing something that's very labor-intensive. And I know there was a burnout factor, and we were trying to keep our horses fresh during that time, not have accidents. And so we
Next time the
appreciate.
green drivers by your house, walk out and just kind of stand next to the truck. Once they get done picking everything up, don't walk while the arms move. Just get a sense of the heat that comes off that truck. So besides the 100-degree temperature, it's easily 10, 15 degrees warmer around that truck. And
I bet.
so,
And aside from all the houses we had to pick up, we have 28 parks that were also impacted, that had some safety issues that we were having to deal with too, that not everybody saw because hey, I've got this brush in front of my truck. We had to take care of some of our things as well. So I appreciate, those were Herculean efforts. We appreciate it. We were really hoping for a declaration, a disaster declaration that would have given us some access to some other resources. But thank you all for being patient with us during this time.
Thank you. Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, Shane.
Last is A6, discuss future agenda items. I want to potentially bring back the tree replacement ordinance that we were looking at many moons ago. Tear down a tree, you got to put some trees back. See the downfalls of not taking action of that all across Brookhaven. Also, future meeting, preferably for a certain date. So we might have to have another meeting. I'd like to talk about increasing our senior and disabled homestead exemption from 80,000 to 100. I think that'll be a welcomed relief for people this year, something that I think we should look at. And then that's kind of it for right now. Does anyone else have any?
Mayor, to piggyback on the increase in the senior exemption,
Is it something you want to discuss later? Because we cannot discuss it at this time.
yeah, just to add to the future is to include the disabled.
I just said that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He did say that.
Okay, I missed it, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
To the same amount.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Councilmember Wright?
Just two, and I know I've had an opportunity to talk with Leo regarding some of the Ordinance 56, and we have the FB Text Connect app presentation coming forward. I really want to make sure that we look at some of the lessons learned, and I know Leo has a list that he'd like to approach of addressing this, and I really want to look at the recycle carts and trash carts and what we define as the front of a building, and how we are enforcing that ordinance. And so, Leo, I know you and I have talked. Thank you very much for your time and your attention to that, but I think it is something we need to, clarify going forward. And then lastly, I believe, is the finance folks here? I believe there's a potential for a module for the water payments that we had talked about, that with the new water meters, maybe Mark's not here either, that the residents might be able to see their water bills. Is that something that we could explore and see what the module costs and how close we are to potentially implementing that? I'd like to couch all of that. I think that would address a lot of residents across the community.
I kind of wanted to also have a conversation about speeding in the neighborhoods. I think I've heard that from different council members in numerous conversations, and I wanted to see if there's anything we might be able to do with that. And then also congestion in the neighborhoods. I know that particularly in my neighborhood, that's an issue, so I wanted to see if we can delve into that.
Okay. Councilmember Williams, anything?
I'm good.
All right, we will recess for dinner. It's 5:33. Thank you.